Okay, so I promised videos based off of how we do our problems. So, last time we were together, we talked about drawing angles. This first picture in the packet just talks about how we can picture an angle using pencils. If we connect either the 2 points or the erasers together, they become our vertex. It's just a way of imagining picture, or an angle using common things. Now, the one I do want to talk about though is our model it. We can use benchmark angles to get the idea of what our angles should look like. So we know a benchmark is 90 degrees. In our problem, we were to draw a 30-degree angle. So if I know I have a 90-degree angle, I also know that 30 times 3 is 90. So I could divide my 90-degree angle into 3 equal parts, or as equal as I can get them, right? And what that means is each of these parts should be approximately 30 degrees. So then I take one of them because I only want one angle, and now I have approximately what would be a 30-degree angle, knowing what I know about benchmarks. So, moving on to our connected pieces. This is going to step us through how do we draw angles using protractors. And I'm going to show, I grabbed one of each. I grabbed the 180, I grabbed the 360, just so that you can see how those work. So our step 1 is to draw a ray on a sheet of paper and place the protractor center point exactly on the end point of your ray. What part of the angle is this? This is going to be the vertex. So I'm not sure everyone is still on board. This right here, that piece right there, that little circle. Let's see if you can see it right there. That little circle, this little circle, that's what has to line up with our endpoint. So if I were to just draw a random line, I'm going to use this for my straight edge. If I just draw a random line, doesn't matter which one I'm using, this hole lines up with my endpoint, which is going to be my vertex. Okay, so there's that one lining up with the vertex. We'll talk about zero marks in just a second, but here's this one. I'm making sure that my point is in that hole. If you don't, it throws off our measurement, like when we talked about in the lesson before this, where the angle measure has to be set at 0. So keeping our protractor's point on the end point of a ray, it says draw a point on your ray at 0. But really, we just need to notice this has a line right here. I'm going, when I line up my vertex, I'm not going to line up my vertex to where this line is off. I want to line up my vertex to where it disappears in, let's see if I can zoom this in, making it easier for you to see. I want my line, so here's that again. I don't want it off. I want that line to disappear in the line that I drew. And if you want to mark where your 0 is, you can mark with where your 0 is. In this case, since my endpoint is here, my ray is going that one, I'm using this 0. Okay? If I'm using the protractor, the 360, I'm lining this 0 up with this end. And so then I'm going to line up my vertex, line up my line. I still have a 0 line. And that 0 line should disappear in the line of the ray that we drew and line up with the 0. And then I can measure. It says there are 2 marks on the protractor labeled 30. Choose the one that is 30 degrees from our 0 mark. Now if I'm using the circle protractor, I'm going to see the 0 and the 30 mark. Now, if you're using the 0 protractor and you're drawing an angle, someone in 5th hour said, well, the way I did it, here I've got a blank spot here is she lined up her 0. So she found her 0. She put a mark. She put a mark in the little circle, making sure that she knew where that was. And then she found the angle measure that we were trying to measure, and she marked that. And then she took her straight edge, which was a ruler in her case. I'm going to use this other protractor. And she lined up the points and drew her angle from there. And then if we wanted to measure it, line up my vertex and my 0, and right there is my 30 degrees. So, if you were struggling with the 360 one when it came to drawing, that's one way to do it. Just put your circle down, mark your 0, mark your degree, mark where your hole is. Make sure your protractor doesn't move when you do any of those so that they are all in the right spot. Okay, coming back to here though. If I mark it on with the 180, again, I'm going to line it up. I'm going to find my 30 from my 0. So here's my 0. You can mark it on the outside or on the inside. And then I just want to point out, you still don't have to draw from dot to dot. You can choose, as long as the dots are lined up, you can draw it any length that you want. This is still going to be a 30-degree angle. Okay. From there, so these 1 through 4, those are your steps. That's how we draw an angle. So suppose you choose the other 30 mark and draw a point at that mark. What would your measure angle be? So here's this 30 mark. But if I would have chosen this 30 mark over here, I would have actually had a 150-degree angle, which is obtuse, but we know a 30-degree angle is an acute angle. So we just got to be careful not to choose the correct, but the shape that it makes, whether it's an acute or an obtuse angle, can help us. Think about the right angle. Compare it to the angle you drew. How wide does your angle open compared to a right angle? So when we go back to this right angle here, right, and we are drawing a 30 degree, how many 30 degrees did we have? We had 3 of them, right? And we are drawing 1. So we have an opening that is 1/3 of the 90 degree. I didn't make anyone do the reflect, so now we're moving on to the apply. So when it comes to the apply, they have this one for us. Notice that this is the direction the ray is going. So my 0's on the outside, which means I'm going to follow the outside numbers. We want to measure an 80-degree angle. So I have 80 degrees here and 80 degrees there. Right? So there's my 2 options. But again, because my ray is pointing to the 0 on the outside, I'm going to follow the outside numbers to get to the 80 that's on the outside. That is where my mark is going to go. And remember, we're in the vertex right here. So now I'm going to line those up and draw. And there's my 80 degree, and then we should label, right, 80-degree angle. All right, so draw a 75-degree angle. If I'm drawing it with, I'll draw this one with the 100 or the 180 protractor. I'll draw the next one with the 360. So I'm just going to draw a line, any line. Does not matter which endpoint we use. We can use either endpoint. We just need to mark one of them. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to line up with the circle my vertex. I'm going to make sure that my 0 line here is lined up with the line that I drew. There we go. And then I'm going to mark. I want a 75-degree angle. So since this is where my 0 is, because I'm going that direction, my 75, here's 70 and 80, so here is 75, is this mark right here. From here, I'm going to line up. You don't have to mark on either side. I kind of like to because then it gives me several hashes to line up. But there it is. And then remember, you can draw it however long you want it, as long as those are all lined up. then this is a 75-degree angle. And it does not matter which protractor you are using. So if I take this 0 protractor, line it up, notice we are at the 75-degree mark. Okay? Alright, using the circle protractor, I'm going to use the other one for my straight edge. Draw a line, draw a circle, or an endpoint, doesn't matter where. When I line this up, again, circle in the middle, goes on the vertex. I am going to line the 0 up. There we go. Line the 0 up with my line. Notice though, I don't want to go this way because that's counting 350, 340. So I can either go this way, and we're going for 100 degrees, so I can go to 100 and mark it. Oops, you didn't see where I marked it. Go to 100 and mark it, and then draw my angle this direction, which is fine. It's still a 100-degree angle. Or I can flip it, line it back up, and then count to my 100 over here and draw it that way. But I already marked this one, so I'm going to draw this one. I am going to line it up, draw, and there's a 100-degree angle. And that's how we draw our angle. I know that this is correct because I know that this is an obtuse angle. Barely obtuse, but still obtuse. It's greater than 90 degrees. And that's how we draw angles. If you have questions, please come see me.